All right, I am Fox 26 meteorologist Ramisha Shade. It's that time of the afternoon when you get to find out exactly what is up, what's happening out in the tropics. And we have some interesting things going on out there. It might be getting closer and closer to the middle of November and the end of hurricane season, but the tropics just don't want to leave us alone. They just don't want to shut down. So we are going to talk about what's happening out there. And I think this picture kind of tells the story. This is a live view of what's happening right now in Daytona Beach, Florida. And you can see that camera kind of getting shaken up, rocking and rolling because the wind is picking up, the water is choppy, the waves are increasing. Because Daytona Beach, Florida right now under a hurricane warning, believe it or not. This is a pretty rare scene for the month of November. We just haven't had very many hurricanes hit the U.S. in November. I believe there's just been a couple. So this is definitely going to be a significant ordeal. The good news is that we're not expecting a major hurricane, but even a minimal Category 1 hurricane could still do some damage. We're talking about that coastal flooding, the storm surge flooding, that we could have maybe as much as 3 to 5 feet of water piling up right along the coast. Of course, that very heavy rain, potentially several inches of rain that could lead to some flooding, and we'll have lots of wave action, high rip current risk. So Tropical Storm Nicole and eventually Hurricane Nicole will be the culprit for all of those things happening. Here's a look at Tropical Storm Nicole, and this system has been strengthening as we've been going through the afternoon hours. In fact, as of the latest advisory, the winds have gotten a little bit stronger, and you can just see that rotation, that area of low pressure starting to become a little more well-defined, and it almost seems like it's trying to develop a little eye wall here, pretty ragged at this point, so we'll monitor to see if that eye wall becomes more defined, but we are expecting Nicole to blow up into a hurricane by midday tomorrow. So here is the official track and the current coordinates. Currently, Nicole now up to 65 miles per hour with those maximum sustained winds. So it is a strong tropical storm, movement to the west around 10 miles per hour. And that pressure continues to fall down to 990 millibars at this time. And this is as of the latest 3 p.m. advisory. Nicole still about 250 to 280 miles off to the north and east of the Bahamas, but as it continues to push off to the west, it's going to get closer, and I think by tomorrow, right around noontime, it will be a Category 1 hurricane and likely right over the northwestern Bahamas. For that reason, northwestern Bahamas currently under a hurricane warning. We're talking about wind gusts possibly over 80 miles per hour as Nicole rolls through, several inches of rain, some storm surge flooding, and maybe even a few tornadoes as the system rolls over. It's not going to be finished after it leaves the Bahamas. Then we're talking about Nicole kind of making a turn a bit to the northwest. And what will be in Nicole's path? Well, the Florida Peninsula, unfortunately. So hurricane warnings now in place, extending from about West Palm Beach all the way up to about Daytona Beach. And that is a significant amount of area, and that will continue to be the case as we go into the next 24 to 36 hours. So several locations, several cities will be impacted by what will likely be Hurricane Nicole by tomorrow. So we've got those hurricane warnings for a big chunk of the Florida East Coast. I think by midnight on Thursday, Nicole still with 75 mile per hour winds and likely beginning to make landfall, lashing that Florida East Coast, likely north of Miami, north of West Palm Beach. Nicole will then push across the central Florida Peninsula, likely rolling right over parts of Orlando, and then it's going to make a curve to the north and east. So that means Jacksonville, Florida will be impacted, and then it's going to push up into likely Georgia, the Carolinas, and by this weekend it may even sideswipe parts of NYC all the way up to New York City, maybe bringing some heavy rain there. So Nicole will impact several locations all up and down the eastern seaboard. So we'll be monitoring this closely, but of course the worst of the impacts will be felt in the Bahamas late tonight, throughout the day tomorrow, and then as we go into late Wednesday and Thursday, likely lashing the Florida East Coast and then eventually much of the Florida Peninsula. Here's a look at some of our computer models. These are our spaghetti model plots. So these are several of the computer models basically giving a projection of where they think this tropical cyclone is headed, named Nicole, and most of them are in general consensus that it will push over the Bahamas, take a turn to the northwest, push right into the Florida Peninsula and then make that curve to the north and east near Jacksonville, and then slide right up through Georgia, the Carolinas, and on up into parts of New York City before it falls apart. So this system will have very wide impacts for multiple locations, so we'll be monitoring the coming days. So bottom line, if you have friends, family in the Bahamas and Florida, make sure that they are preparing. If you had a trip planned there, make sure that you are preparing, that things are going to get pretty dicey there, and there could definitely be some major issues. So you may want to rethink that as this system moves in. Sea surface temps out there are pretty warm, still pretty balmy water out there across the Gulf of Mexico, across the Caribbean. So if we do have any additional systems developing, there's still plenty of warm water out there to help to fuel these systems. So it's something that we're going to be monitoring. We are monitoring one additional system. It is several hundred miles off to the east of Bermuda at this point. And yesterday it had about a 60% shot for development over the next 2 to 5 days. But today, not looking as promising that this one will get out of hand. Only a 30% chance for development between the next 2 to 5 days. That's because it is pretty far out in the Atlantic, and it's running into some more unfavorable environments. So I don't think the upper level winds will be favorable for this system to develop, and it looks like there's only a small window for us to get a tropical depression or maybe a tropical storm out of this. So the chances for this surviving and turning into a tropical cyclone at this point are on the low side. But here's a closer look at that system out in the central Atlantic, well away from Bermuda, far away from the U.S., so I don't think we're going to have to worry too much about that one. But of course, Nicole will be one that we are concerned about for the Bahamas and for Florida, and eventually for portions of Georgia and the Carolinas. So if you're in any of those areas, if you're going to be traveling to any of those areas, heads up, you may run into some issues, especially with flooding and with some strong, possibly damaging wind gusts. All right, so we've made it to Nicole. Next on the list would be Owen, then Paula, Richard, Sherry, Tobias, Virginia, and Walter. Hopefully we won't get to any of those, but there's still at least a low chance. Historically, we have had a few systems develop during the middle and end of November. The chance for us getting a hurricane or tropical storm or tropical depression making landfall here in Southeast Texas during November, extremely low, but it's not out of the question. And of course, we will continue to watch it and keep you updated as we go through the rest of our hurricane season, which does officially end on November 30th. So of course, make sure, if you haven't already, we always remind you, download the Fox 26 weather app. Lots of important, critical, potentially life-saving information on there, especially when we have these severe systems move through. And then there's a hurricane tropical section on there as well, so you can find out more about Nicole and any other systems that may pop up. So make sure to head to the App Store and search for Fox 26 and download that weather app. We've got a news app as well. Lots of important information. Of course, it is election day, so we'll have the results coming in throughout the evening. So make sure you download those. You can also check me out on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, at Ramisha Shade TV, at Ramisha Shade Weather, and at Ramisha Shade on Instagram. All right, that will do it for today. Have a great evening. Make sure to get out there and vote and enjoy the nice weather. Much colder weather headed our way in Southeast Texas this weekend. So you can check that out on the Fox 26 weather app. Have a great one and stay safe.